Hello YouTube. This is my first video, so I apologize if I sound like an idiot. But I'm going to go over something very key in all RPG games, and that's the inventory. And I'm going over this because I've looked online and tried to find a lot of videos on it, but couldn't find something simple enough and also something that I wanted to use. So I went ahead and put this together for you. So first thing, I have all my sprites. Start with the player, some items that might be in my game. Got a longbow, a sword, some armor. And the important thing is the inventory object. And this is going to contain all of our items laid out on a grid. And then I also implemented a shop in case you wanted to sell those items. So to start, I've got just the player who has movement keys, and all these do is just move him to the left or right depending on which key you press. Now, this next one is the most important, and it's the item parent. And you need to have a parent because you don't want to have to go into each of these objects and change the variables in them. All you want is the item parent to do everything for you. So you just change what's in here and you can affect all the items you created. So the first thing you do is define your variables. Now the inventory slot just means which slot it's at in the inventory. Now right here we just define INV equals inventory object, and I guess we have it down there too. So we got INV equals inventory, shop equals shop inventory, shop object. Dropped equals true, so that means it has been dropped and not picked up yet. Sold is false, it hasn't been sold. The name, how much it's worth. Now, whether it's pressed or not, and selected or not, and you set these both to false to start, so it's not moving around. Now, what this is going to do is, when it is pressed, it jumps to the mouse. So I'll just show you right now. Now this is the most complicated object, and along with the inventory. So right now we just have our player that moves around, collects objects, and when I press the I key, my inventory comes up. So when I click the object, it's going to jump to where the mouse is, so I can move it wherever I want to. But if I let go, it jumps right back to the inventory. And as you can see, I can't move anything unless I picked it up. And this is essentially what we're doing, is we're having all these laid out to where they jump directly into the inventory. Alright. Hope you're all with me so far. So this is our jump to inventory code. Now first, when we go into it being pressed, if it's dropped, it's not going to do this. But if it's not dropped and it has been picked up, it's going to set all the item parents to deselect them. It's going to select itself, and it's going to set press to true. Now when the left mouse is released, all it does is set press to false, so it is no longer being pressed. So we go back. So if it is not being pressed down, it's going to jump to this slot in the inventory depending on which slot it's been assigned. So if invent slot equals 1, it's going to jump to 40 and 40 in the inventory. And if it's 2, it jumps to 80, 40, and so on. Now I want to show you something in here. What we can do to add more slots to our inventory is just copy this right here, put it down here, and change it up one variable. So if inventory slot equals 5, it's going to jump instead of there back to our original of 40, and then the Y would just go up to 80. And now we have a 5th inventory slot, which we need to add a few more variables to make it work, but that's the gist of it. So upon a collision with player, this gets complicated, but very key to the inventory. So when it collides with the player, it is no longer dropped and it's been picked up. Put that right here. So what it's going to do first is it's going to check if the inventory first slot has been filled or not. And if it is, then it goes down here. And if that one's full, it goes down there. If that one's full, it goes down, and so on. So if our first slot is not full, it's going to set the slot to 1. And it's going to also set the inventory slot, the first one, to be filled. If these are not true, it's going to jump to the 2nd slot, 3rd slot, and 4th slot. And I only made 4 because it keeps it simple for now. So what I want it to do when it's selected, so when you've pressed it down, even just once, is it's going to draw a rectangle around it so you know that this current item is selected. Alright, so now we go into our inventory, and there's just a few variables, basically each slot we have, and what these are arrays. So this just means the inventory slot 0 is false. Now these could be whatever you want. You can call it slot 0 equals false. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it slot 1 if you would like. But what I've done is just created an array so you know. Now what the first thing we do is we set it to deactivate itself. So it's not active in the variable, but it is an activated object. And right here I just added the gold, just so that when I go over how we sell them, we know how much we're getting for it. So in the step is really nothing that complicated. All it does is if it's active, it's going to jump to the screen. Otherwise, it's going to go off the screen to x of 1000, y of 0. Now what this is doing is checking if every slot has been filled, so that when we pick up an item, it knows whether the inventory is full and we don't get items on top of each other. So what it's saying is if the first slot is full, and 2nd slot is full, and 3rd slot is full, and the 4th slot's full, what we're going to do is full inventory equals true. Now if any one of these is false, it's going to set the inventory to not being full. Now what we can do is if we have, say, 10 slots or 16 slots in our inventory, we just go in here and add a few more variables. But for right now, I'm not going to do that. Now what I'm doing here is it's drawing itself, and then it's also going to draw the variable gold at the position of itself, x plus 150, and y plus 10. It's going to color it yellow so you know it's gold. Now what I do, this could be anything, say you wanted to click on an inventory if you're making a mobile game, you could just click on it, say this is the inventory button, you click it, and it opens up your inventory. So what it's doing when I press I is if it is false, if active is false, it's going to set it to true, otherwise active equals false. So I'll go in here and show you those variables at work. And I hope I'm making sense in some kind of way. If you have any questions, just put them in the comments. So when I push I, the inventory is active, and the shop is active as well, which is its own object. Now when I hit this, you click it, it selects it only when you click it. But if you keep pressing down, it's setting the variable press to true. Therefore, it's not jumping to the inventory, it's jumping to the mouse. And when you let go, it jumps back to its slot, unless you accidentally sell it like I just did there. So the last thing we have is our shop. And in this, we have the same variables as in the inventory, except it's going to jump to a little bit right of the inventory, so they're on top of each other. No, it basically has every variable the exact same as the inventory object, so you can go in and look at those and change them. Now these objects literally have nothing in them, because we've defined our parent object to have every part of what we want. So we don't have to go in and change this object variables, except in the case, which is going to be in my next video, of statistics such as damage. So let's say I want this object's damage to be equal to 10. Maybe its speed equals 2, meaning, I gotta change that, maybe attack speed equals 2. And then let's say you want to go in here, make this object's damage equal, I don't know, 5, you could have it whatever. And then its attack speed to 1. And I'll go over this in the next video as far as making our objects usable. So once again, the item parent has all the variables we need, and I did notice an error in there, that when it's left released, and it's at the position of the shop, so when you move it to the shop, sold equals true. And what I didn't do is I didn't put else in here. Which is pretty important. And then also, I need to come back in here and do if sold equals false. That way, it's not selling itself over and over, and you could just make 1,000,000 gold. So there we go. It's going to set the inventory slot to 0, and the inventory objects gold value plus to 25. Now in our room, it's just a standard room with objects in it. You have to place them all to make them work. And once again, we'll go over it. And again, this is my first video, so don't judge me too much. Hopefully you guys can take something from it. Oops. Okay, so I hit an error. If pressed equals true. Clearly, something went wrong in there. Okay, so I figured out the problem that was in here when I added these variables. I did not do the inherited event of the item. And you have to have these if you add any event actions. If you add a step, you have to have the inherited event. Otherwise, it's not going to perform what you want it to. And these are necessary for parent objects. So one last time. Alright, it's working this time. So here's my inventory. When I hit these objects, they jump to my inventory. And if it's full, it's not going to pick them up. When I click it, it selects it and presses it. So it jumps to the mouse when it's pressed. Now if I want to sell it, I just move it to the shop. And apparently it stopped working for me. These are some of the errors that you're going to run into as a developer, and you need to know how to fix them. So what I did here is I put it equal to true before I checked if it's false. So what I want to do is put that in my code here. Now hopefully I'm making some kind of sense to you guys. I'm going to put the link for this code itself in the description so you can use it in your games freely. I don't require any documentation. So now we sold it. It added 25 to our gold, and you could do it to multiple items. Alright, now our inventory is no longer full. We'll be able to pick up more items. And because I haven't added the variables in here for each slot, it's not going to do what I want it to, and it's going to cause an error. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them in the link below. And I hope you enjoyed.